In September of 2012, we left our home port of Seattle on a trip around the world in our Nordhavn 52 Dirona. Hello, this is James and Jennifer Hamilton aboard Nordhavn 52 Dirona at the Isle of Gia in Scotland. Today we're going to inspect the engine accessory drive belt and bearings.
Exactly. You might wonder why we're doing an inspection. Well, as you know, I'm a big fan of fixing things, and less big fan of just doing inspections, but this is one that's important. You always hear those stories about diesel engines that last forever, and they do last quite well, but forever is an exaggeration. They do fail occasionally, but really they're remarkably reliable. Very seldom do diesel engines fail in recreational applications. What kills them is not wear, it's people make mistakes. Parts fail, or maintenance is not done when it should be done. This is a beautiful example of a super simple job, really easy to do, that is absolutely vital. The condition that we're trying to avoid here is if a drive belt breaks, that's the belt on the front of the engine that drives the alternator, the coolant pump, other accessories on the engine. If that belt fails, the engine overheats. It can overheat very rapidly, and sometimes it can overheat so rapidly that you don't get a warning before it's already dangerously hot. So it's a condition worth avoiding. Second is bearing failure will do the same thing. A bearing failure will seize up, and again, no accessories being driven. The engine's at risk under those conditions. So we really want to avoid that. That's one of the overheating is a great way to shorten a diesel engine's life. And so what we're doing today is just spending a few minutes of doing what I do annually and just checking to make sure those bearings are all good. And just to give you some background, our engine's got around 10,600, 10,700 hours on it. And in those years, I've replaced the drive belt twice, so it runs for quite a long time. The current belt that's in there has been in, I forget the exact number, but I'm guessing it's upwards of 4 or 5 years. It's been a long time, so it could need replacement today. The bearings, I've had one component where I need to replace the bearing. When we go down there and have a look at the system, I'll show which bearing I replaced and what I looked for in order to know what needed replacement. I think we should just get down there and start working.
Okay, let's go.
Hello again. Time to get started. Why don't you come around here and we'll have a look at the drive assembly and see what needs to be done. What we're looking at here is, this is the protective covers for the drive belt assembly. Inside it you can see the drive belt itself. The belt's running around 2 alternators, one there and one there, the coolant pump, and then a tensioner and a couple idler pulleys. So what we're going to do is get these covers off as the first part of the job. Now before we do that, let's have a look at one part of this engine that's less common than a standard John Deere 6068 AFM 75 engine. And that is, it has a big 4.5 kilowatt, 190 amps at 24 volt alternator on there. Now for ocean going vessels, it's pretty common to have a big alternator on there. And so a big one like this beast up front is pretty common, and it's not even that uncommon to have 4.5 kilowatts. It's, upwards of 4 is not uncommon. What's maybe a little less common is we have a duplicate of a twin on the other side. This is another 4.5 kilowatts, and so when we're in crossing configuration, or whenever we're operating the engine, we can produce 9 kilowatts of power. That has a real upside in that it means that we can run all the air conditioning systems. We can do anything we want underway, just driving off of these. We never have to run the generator underway. However, it does mean that the belt assembly that drives these alternators needs to be heavy duty. We're using a serpentine belt. These are flat belts that are about 1 inch wide, and I love them much better than V belts in their longevity and reliability, and just generally easier to deal with. So you'll see that when we take it apart. First thing to do is to get the cover off, so I'm going to get to work on that.
So I noticed you got the label on there that says to disable auto start and the battery parallel before servicing. Did you do that?
Very good point. So if you look up there, let me just walk over to it. It's a good point. If you look up here, you'll see this blue light right here is off. And that means that I've shut off auto start. So this engine is not going to start by itself. And so of course it's absolutely vital that that be done for safety reasons. And that's why this warning is on there as well.
And do you want to quickly say why the engine would auto start?
Oh, it's extremely unlikely that it would auto start. What would be required is the batteries get sufficiently discharged that the generator needs to run, which is a few hours away right now. Second, the generator for some reason fails to start, which it basically never does. If both those conditions happen, then the automation system would start the main engine and run it instead of the generator and send email to both of us warning us that the generators have experienced some sort of fault and it's unable to run. Make sense?
Yep, great system. Now are those custom covers?
Sort of, partly. This cover on the left side right here, I guess it's the right side of the engine. This cover is a standard John Deere 6068 assembly for a single alternator engine, which is by far the most common. When this engine was delivered by Cascade Engine, the distributor for John Deere, we requested that there be a second alternator installed on it, and so they built this additional bracket. And so this belt is all protected, even though it's running an unusual routing. And then they would have installed a longer belt, of course, and changed the idler assembly a little bit.
Okay.
Just taking off the first of those attachments. There's 3 on this upper cover.
Those are long bolts.
They are. You have to go all the way through the cover. That's open. I'll clean this cover when it's done. It usually has a little bit of belt dust inside it, although these belts slip almost not at all, and so they're a very clean assembly, very little belt dust. So there won't be much to clean, but I will do it.
Do non-serpentine belts tend to slip more and produce more dust?
They do, and if you're trying to drive very high output alternators, it's almost it's impossible to drive these with a single V belt. So you need 2 V belts, and it's very difficult to get 2 V belts that are exactly the same length. And so invariably one slips a tiny amount, the other one slips a tiny amount, and you end up with just more belt dust in general. So it's a system that works, but it's, as you can probably tell, not my favorite. This one's held on by 2 big bolts. There we go. I think that's the same. It is. Oops. That one's dropping out on me.
Did you get it?
Yep. There we go. It's just an inconvenient place to drop things because it's easy to lose them.
Yeah, with the engine.
And then the payback is, if you don't find them, it may cause trouble later. This is a little heavy, but not too bad. Actually, it's not so much heavy, it's just an awkward design. See a little tiny bit of dirt there.
Where do you see the dirt?
Oh, just on my hands and inside the belt assembly.
Okay. So you showed us quickly some of the components before with the pumps and things. Point them out a little bit more.
Yeah, I'm just gonna get that assembly settled down. Okay, so here's the two big alternators. Here's the tensioner. These are both idlers. These are just holding the belt in position so that it's wrapped fully around there, around the pulley and not slipping. This is the tensioner. And here is the engine coolant pump. One thing that surprises me about this engine is with 10,600 and some odd hours, the coolant pump's never been changed. It's still running original pump. In fact, it's running original everything on this engine except the injectors that were changed at 8,000 hours. So it's, from a longevity perspective, it's amazing. Another thing I'd like to point out, I find it impressive, is look inside here. This is a, this is a 10,600 hour engine. Hardly any oil leaks. It just looks nice and clean. Remarkable given the number of hours it's had.
We're actually 10,900, I think.
Is it that high?
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
great. Yeah, they do mount up.
Yeah.
Okay, let's get the belt off there.
So before you start that, what does an idler do and what does a tensioner do? Explain the difference.
The tensioner is a large spring that pushes this pulley against the belt. What it means is as the belt stretches, the tension always stays appropriate. It's exactly what the spring is set to. So it's a nice design that doesn't require any service. Idlers, the reason you have an idler on there is if you wrapped around there and went straight across to here, it would not have enough belt wrapped on the pulley, and it could possibly slip. And so high load components tend to have the belt wrapped around tightly, down to the idler, and then back up, and then back down again. Same reason, trying to get a little belt wrap in order to be able to have the strength to drive.
I see. Okay.
I'm going to slip over there and grab a larger wrench in order to get the pulley back. So the way these are set up is there's a 1/2-inch drive socket in there, and very easily, this is fairly heavy load, but it's super easy just with a little bit of leverage to be able to slip that belt off and then let the tension back off. You can see how far it goes around. And that's done. So now the belt can come off. We can have a look and see how it's doing. Okay. So what we're going to look for is any cracking on the back of this belt, and you can see still has the John Deere model number, part number on it, clear as day. It's really an excellent condition down the back.
And how long ago did you change that? How many hours?
I should have looked before we started the video, but my guess or my memory is about 4,000 hours. That'd be about right. The primary thing we're looking for on here is I'm going to just twist it slightly like this, and I'm looking for cracks. This is the side that you'll find cracks, and there's one. You can have a close look at that. See, there's a little crack right there, and I'll probably find a few more. It's actually in remarkably good shape. There's a crack. There's a crack right there.
Oh yeah, yeah.
It's in remarkably good shape. I'm looking to see if there's any. There's a couple together. See, so there's 2 cracks right there and another one right there.
Yeah.
This belt's actually an acceptable case. If you see little cracks here and there, it's actually acceptable. What you don't want to see is cracks that are running all the way across. I'm a little bit on the conservative side, and so because I know this belt's been in there for a long time, and there's a little tiny bit of cracking on it, I probably will change it. Although, quite frankly, with all the cracks we've found so far, don't span more than one of these little ridges. And so, yeah, there's another pair of them right there. It really doesn't need to be changed. I think I'm going to change it anyway, but doesn't need to be. You can see there is some belt dust on there.
Quite a bit, yeah.
Quite a bit. So it's a little bit of a dirty thing.
Is that a very expensive part?
It's been so many years. I expected to go through more of these, and so it's been enough years. Actually, since the engine was new, we bought several new belts, and I think we still have a spare or two left, so I don't
we
remember.
do. Yeah.
I'm guessing it's probably $70, maybe 60, maybe 80. It'll be in that range.
So not very much for something you replace every few thousand hours.
No, it's not much at all. I'm going to stick that there, and we'll have to go into the parts and get into the parts supply and get one of the spares. This is actually a good time to check the bearings, and so we'll find out if we've got any problems. So let's have a look. What I'm doing is I'm spinning, and I'm listening for a rumble from bearings that are showing excessive wear. And so this sounds relatively good. This sounds excellent. Also sounds good. This one, if you look carefully, if you look carefully, has been replaced. So one time when I spun that, I felt a roughness to it and a rumble when you spin it. So what I'm going to look for is I'm going to put load on it and spin and look try to feel any roughness and listen for noise.
So you're putting load on it just like right there with your hand?
Yeah,
right? Okay.
Exactly. And these are really nice and smooth, feel great. This I've already spun, so now I'm just trying to feel if there's any roughness in the bearings, and they're excellent.
So the one on the alternator made a bit of a kind of a squeaking sound as you were turning it,
It
initially.
did.
Is that a problem? Yeah,
It
there I
did.
could hear again.
Yeah, you could just barely hear that. Caught my interest. But the bearings feel excellent, and so I'm not too worried about that one. That one, same thing. Absolutely, that one's absolutely perfect. So you got a tiny squeak on that one, just when it starts off. I'm not concerned about that. They've got another good bearing here, so that's all been good news. The water pump, it'll leak water if it starts to loosen off, so it's not loose. And it looks reasonable as well, although you can just barely hear it a bit. Certainly can't feel anything in there at all.
So what do you hear? What are you hearing?
You hear that little tiny bit of rumble?
Yeah, a little bit of roughness to it.
There's no roughness in it, but it does sound a little bit like that. So it feels very smooth. I suspect that bearing's starting to show a little tiny bit of wear, but in my estimation, it's got years left in it, and so everything looks pretty good. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk over to where you are and clean my hands up, and then we'll go get it. We'll go get a brand new belt.
Okay, I'm going to go get that spare belt.
Good stuff.
So we keep our spares in a lot of different places on the boat, and these particular ones are underneath the bed. So lift up the mattress, lift up the base. One of the really nice things we did here is we installed these 2 gas struts so that you can actually hope to lift it.
Yeah, that used to be a 2-person job to get that up, because the wood platform is fairly heavy, and so
the mattress is really heavy too.
right. So it ends up being really tough to get. Look at the storage in here. This is Jennifer's realm. We see some things are closed, and some places,
As we close here and over there, and then all down the center here is spare parts, and underneath is like a couple spare laptops here, and then underneath are very large bins that extend down a couple feet deep, full of spares. So that's all main engine spares, some more main engine spares there.
Right. Those are all. I guess below that's water tank.
Yeah, the water tank's all underneath the bed. So we've got
Gotcha.
lots more spares here, and then fuel filters, and the parts we're looking for are in this narrow little spot here that they fit nicely into. So there's a couple belts here. We got a brand new one and a used one. We tend to always keep at least one used part just as an extra backup if something goes terribly wrong. So there we go. One brand new
Good
John
job.
Deere.
Excellent. Looks great. What year does it say when it was delivered to us?
21st of July, 2010.
2010. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
we've
it's
had these a while.
that's why I don't know what it cost, because it was a decade ago that we bought it.
Yeah, it doesn't have a price on it, so I can't tell.
Well, let's put that baby on.
Okay, excellent.
All right, let's get this belt on there. Just sorting it around the harmonic balancer.
That's that big piece of metal there, that donut
Right
shape one?
there.
Yeah, okay.
Yep. And what I'm doing is I'm just slowly feeding it up through the appropriate path.
Is there any particular order to how you're doing it? Does it matter?
I choose to put it on one of these pulleys last because there's no edge on it.
Yeah.
So it's just a little easier to put it there.
And is it hard to get the belt to line up in the grooves like that, like on the alternator?
No, there's an edge on here and there, and so mostly just fits properly.
Okay.
It's worth checking before it's final to make sure that it's in the right spot.
Yeah. But I see that little edge would stop you from sort of sliding it on later.
Once there's pressure on it, you won't adjust it very easily.
Yeah.
So now what I'm going to do is take the tension off of it and then slide this underneath.
Is that very hard to pull that tensioner back?
No, it's just light tension. I've got a lot of leverage, so it's relatively easy.
Okay.
So at that point, it's all that's done. That's complete except for the safety shields.
Wow, that was fast.
Yes, it's a really easy job. So these just barely fit down there.
And you already just cleaned those covers up so they're nice and clean.
Yeah,
Before you put them back on.
just cleaned them up a bit. I'm checking to see which one is the short one. Because the short one is a good thing there. That's just started. And then the longer one goes through there. That sounds tight, but it's only a very weak ratchet, so I do final tightening by hand just so I know what I've got. And you can see it's nowhere close to tight yet.
When you said it's a weak ratchet, is that because you only applied a certain amount of tightening to it, or it's just not a very strong tool?
That particular tool is fairly weak. Mostly used for driving screws, things like that.
Okay.
And so, as a professional mechanic, usually oftentimes uses a more powerful tool.
Yeah.
And if you are using one, you have to be very careful. You don't put too much torque on things. Even with this one, it's possible to put too much torque on it, but it's relatively controllable. You can run it as slow as that,
Yeah.
or fast.
Okay. It's a nice tool.
It is nice. I use it seemingly every day. Ooh, I got lucky on that one.
Oh, that would have been a nasty one to lose.
There's a good reason not to. I'm putting both of those, the washer and the nut on at the same time. More prone to error. That is the generator auto starting.
Well, I think we should turn that off before we finish the job. What do you think?
I think you're probably right.
So what are you doing there?
Just telling the generator auto start system to shut it off. It won't shut it off instantly because it takes it through a cool down cycle, but it's going off.
Okay. That's a little quieter.
Yeah. It's funny, you know, it's a quiet generator, but it is still in the same room.
I suppose you want to put the covers back on before you sort of run the engine to do a test, in case there was a problem.
You're right, it's oftentimes better to test things before you put it together. I've done this job a couple times before. I'm confident it's done right, and so I'll bolt all the covers on, but I still will test it to be sure.
Right, okay.
Well, that's ready to go, so time to test it.
Excellent. Let's go upstairs.
First thing is auto start. Put that on. Light goes blue, which says auto start is protected. And this light goes out saying that that's auto start's on, which is a normal operating mode.
Sorry, which light was that?
The light will come on here if auto start's not enabled. That's the check
okay.
light.
Yeah, okay.
So if I see that, I know auto start's not on. And next thing is start the engine and make sure we like what we hear. There it is. It's running at about exactly 800 RPM right there. I don't like it running at extremely low RPMs when it's cold, and so normally the Deere engines idle at 60. It's probably at 600 RPM. For a variety of reasons, we've upped ours to 800. We run at 800 RPM, and 800 is perfectly fine. Consumes a tiny amount more fuel, but there's some advantages in our configuration with hydraulic equipment that makes a little higher RPM advantageous. But even with that at 800, when it's ice cold like this, I oftentimes just click and hold that, and what will happen, it boosts up to 950 RPM. I don't shift into gear like this or do anything else, but just for the first few minutes of operation, I like to let it run at a little higher RPMs, just a little bit better for it. Also, what I notice happens is time spent at very low RPMs generally causes more vibrations, and you oftentimes see brackets breaking or parts failing just due to excessive vibration. So there's a little bit of an upside to at least when it's cold and likely to shake a bit more, to run at slightly higher RPMs. Okay, so I'm going to go downstairs, just have one last look to make sure that this is the way it should be, but I think it's a done job. Okay, it's a little loud in here. Big diesel running at 950 RPM, but you can see that's what the assembly looks like. You'll see a light also of that. Good stuff. Well, you won't often find a job easier or any simpler than this one, but what I like about this job, well, very little actually, but the good thing about this job is that check means that we'll go another year, relatively unlikely that we'll see bearing failure or belt failure as a consequence. And this engine, if we don't let stupid things like that cause failures, little accessories cause failures, if we don't let that happen, then there's a very good chance this engine's got a lot of hours left in it. So, ready to go, ready for the next trip.
Excellent, thank you.